Hello and welcome to the third video of this tutorial series where we are building an event planning application to show you how quick and easy it is to build applications with GW apps. Now in the last two videos we created our forms and added some workflow to those forms. In this video we're going to be focusing on views, which are how we can view, manage, and report on the data we submit with our forms. We're going to be creating a few different view types and also creating an embedded view for our event form. And hopefully by the end of this video, you have the knowledge you need to create any number of custom views you'd like. We're going to get started by creating an active events view for our event form. So let's go ahead and jump in and see how we can go about doing that. So here we are in our application, and I'm currently on the event form, as you can see. And if you take a look at the left-hand navigation, under this new event planning form link, we have an all event planning view link. So let's go ahead and open up this all event planning view. I've got several test records in here that I created just so that we can better visualize the changes that we're making as we go. And as I mentioned, the very first view we're going to create is an active events view, which will only show us active events. In order to do that, we're going to configure this view. And in order to do that, we have to first get into the view editor. Now there are a few different ways we can get there. If our application is launched and we have a view open, as we do, the quickest way is to use this three-dot icon in the top right corner and then click Edit View. So here we are in the view editor for a table view. Now the very first thing I want to do is decide which fields I want to see in the view and then organize them in a meaningful way. So in order to do that, we just come to this displayed columns section, and we can remove fields from this view by clicking this X icon on the far right of the field. So I'll remove the record ID. And then once a field is removed, it jumps over to this field palette over here where we can actually just drag it right back in if we wanted to add that again. So I'm going to actually take that one out because I don't really want to see the record ID. I'm also going to get rid of target attendance, duration, attachments, and drive pickers I don't really need to see. And the rest of these system fields I don't really need to see either, so I'm going to just clear those out as well. So that leaves us with these 7 fields here, and the last thing I want to do is reorganize them, put them in a different order. I don't need to make many changes here, but I do want to make sure the start date, end date, start time, end time are before the location. So I'm going to drag this below to the end, and the event manager can be way at the end. So I'm going to drag that at the bottom. The next thing I want to do is add a filter to this view so that it will only display active events. So I'm going to head over to the filters tab. In this tab, we can add some sorting and grouping rules, and we can also configure the search function of the view. And then of course we can add filters as well. So let's go ahead and add a new filter. It's going to be a status filter. We're going to say status equals active. Now the view will only show records in the active stage. And I'm also going to make this filter uneditable, meaning that my application users will not have the ability to temporarily edit or remove this filter from the view. The final thing I want to do here in the view editor is change the name of this view. Right now it's just called all event planning, and I want it to be called active events. So I'm going to go over to the settings tab. Now there are many settings here in the settings tab that we can configure, but we're actually going to do a lot of this in view. So we're not going to look at these settings just yet, but I am going to change the name on the top here to active events. Perfect. And that's all we need to do in the view editor. I'm going to go ahead and save and then launch our view so that we can take a look at what it looks like. All right, this looks pretty good. All of the columns are in an order we want them in. Our view name is correct, and it's hard to tell right now, but all of these records are in the active stage of their workflow. Now some of the other changes I want to make can be done in what's called in-view editing. In-view editing allows us to make changes to the view while we are in the view and then save those changes. The benefit of this is that we can visually see the changes we're making as we're making them so that we can make a judgment about whether or not it's working. However, keep in mind that these settings that we do in view can also be configured in the view editor. Now the first thing I want to do is change some of these column widths. I'm going to start with the start date, and what we can do is we can just select the column header, and this gives us access to formatting and different options for the column. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the column width to extra small, and I also want to make this date format the shortest one, which is just this one here. I'm going to do the same thing for the end date. We'll do extra small and the shortest date. Start time and end time can also be extra small. And I think everything else is good as is. Now, whenever we make edits to the view in this way, we still have to save those changes. If I were to refresh the page right now, it would not save these changes. It would return to its initial state. So in order to save, we come up to this three-dot icon, and we just click Save. Now, there are still additional visual changes I want to make to this view, and I'm going to use the in-view settings to make those changes. So I'm going to click the three-dot icon and select Settings. The first setting I want to turn on is Preview Pane. This will allow us to select a record here and have it displayed in the view. This will limit the number of redirects we take in viewing records, and it's just a quicker way of getting to view data from those records. I'm going to make it 75% of the view, and the rest of these settings are fine as they are. Let's go ahead and scroll down. This formatting section, I do want to make a couple changes. I like the comfortable display density. It's just a little bit neater. And since this is an active events view, I'm going to change the header color to a greenish color, just a very light green color. Maybe a little more green. Okay, great. And finally, the last setting I want to tick on here is alternating row colors, just to distinguish our rows from each other. And again, to save these changes, we have to just come up to the three-dot icon and click Save. Perfect. Now that does it for this view. I'm going to go ahead and close the settings panel here. Now the next thing we need to do is create an archived events view, because at the moment, since this is our only view, we only have access to see our active events. The easiest way we can do this, instead of rebuilding the view from scratch, we can actually make a duplicate copy of this active events view. The copy will retain all of the view settings, all of the column widths, formats, etc. And then we can go in and change the filter, change the name, and change the header color to match our archive stage. Alright, so that does it for the table views for our events. We have a way of viewing active events and archived and draft records as well. The next thing we want to do is just create a very simple calendar so we can view events on a calendar. So let's go ahead and get started with that. Alright, so the very first thing we need to do is create our calendar. So I'm going to head over to Edit App, go to our View section, and click this New View button on the header bar. We're going to call this Event Calendar. We're going to select our event form, and we're going to choose the calendar option. Go ahead and click Create. So here we are again in the View Editor, except this time we have a Calendar tab instead of a Table Columns tab. Now let's go ahead and start configuring our calendar. These calendar settings, I'm going to keep most of them the same. Month is good. We don't want to hide the weekends because our events might happen on weekends, but I will toggle on Enable Creating Records from Calendar, and it will be Calendar 1, which is this calendar here. We're going to rename this in just a second. All right. Now this calendar on the bottom here, we can have multiple calendar options. So that way we can display data in different ways on the calendar. But we only really need one calendar option, and we're going to rename this to Active Events. Okay. Now for the event title, which is what we'll display on the calendar, we're going to choose Event Title. The color type, we'll keep it on status. It doesn't really matter here because we're only showing active events, but this way they will display as a green color. We could choose a custom color if we wanted. Now the start date, end date, we just need to select the start date and end date fields from our form. Similarly, start time and end time, we need to choose start time and end time fields. Perfect. And the last thing we need to do here is just add a calendar filter, and we're going to say status equals active. Okay, let's go ahead and save, and then let's just launch our view to see what it looks like. So as you can see, there are no records displayed on the calendar at the moment. That is because all of the test records I created do not happen in January 2024. However, since I did turn on Enable Creating Records from the calendar, what this allows me to do is I can click and drag to select a date range, let go, and it will redirect to a brand new event form with the start date and end date pre-filled, and then the start time and end time defaulted to 12 a.m. Let's go ahead and just create this event real quick. We'll just call this test event just so we can see it on the calendar. I'm going to publish it because it needs to be active, and then I'm going to go to the event calendar. Alright, so that just about does it for our event views. We still need to create our task views, but I'm going to create those off camera because the process is identical to what we just went through and there's no need for me to repeat it. However, those views will also have some grouping and sorting applied to them, so we're going to jump in, take a look at those really quickly, show you how you can apply those groupings yourself, and then we're going to create a Kanban board for our tasks as well, which is just another view type. So let's go ahead and jump in and take a look at the table views I created for our tasks. All right, so here we are back in the application, and you'll notice on the left here I now have 3 task views. We have task by event, by department, and by assignee, and the only difference between these views is they group records in different ways. So if we go to tasks by event, we are first grouping by our event, and then by the status of the tasks, planned, in progress, completed, or past due. And then, of course, when we expand that, we have access to see the task. By department, similarly, we are starting with department, and then going into event, and then status groupings. And finally, by assignee, we're starting with the assignee, event, and status. Now, to apply these groupings, we can either use the view editor and use the filters tab to add the groups, or since this is somewhat of a visual change, we can use the in-view filtering so that we can see our changes being made in real time, and we can save it, of course, that way. Now, if we click the view filters icon, you'll see we've got obviously our filters, we've got our sorting, which can also be applied here, and then we've got our column grouping, and this is where we create the groups. Now, whenever you pick a field to group by, it will create one of these little boxes, which you can then expand and enable some additional options here. And of course, if you're going to add groupings in this way, you want to come up to the 3-dot icon here and click Save once you're done with the groups. Now, something else we still need to do is create a view to embed onto our event form so that we can view tasks associated with our events directly from the event form. And in order to do this, all I'm going to do is configure this view slightly by removing all of the groupings I've added. I'm then going to sort it by due date, and we will do ascending. And then I'm going to click this 3-dot icon and click Save View As, and we'll just call this Tasks Embedded. And we're going to go ahead and create that. Now you'll see it does appear on the left-hand navigation here. We're going to remove this from the navigation in the next video, but for now we're going to leave it here, and we're going to move over to our event form. Now on this form, we're going to go into Edit Form using the 3-dot icon, Edit Form. I'm going to go over to our Tasks tab, and then on the left palette, I'm going to grab a View field component. And here we get to select which view, and it's going to be that Tasks Embedded view, and click Add Field. Great. Now we need to configure this view a little bit, so I'm going to click the Properties icon. And the first thing we're going to do is just remove the embedded part of the display name. Go ahead and get rid of that so it just says Tasks. Then we're going to head over to the Filters section. We're going to make sure Filter by Current Record is turned on and the event is selected. This will ensure that our tasks are only showing up for the currently selected event record. And the last thing I want to do here to avoid a redundancy is we don't need to see tasks in the section title as well as in the embedded view. So I'm just going to go to the properties of the section, and I'm going to hide title and description. Go ahead and save and launch. All right, now let's go to our active events view and select a event. Go over to the tasks tab, and there you'll see we have 2 tasks for this event sorted by the due date. And we've got the status on the far right, so we can get easy access to that status. Now, as I mentioned, the very last thing we're going to do is just create a quick Kanban board for our tasks. So let's head over to Edit App, go to the View section, click New View. We'll call this Task Kanban. We'll select our task form and choose the Kanban view type. Here we are again in the View Editor. Now for the Kanban column source, we're going to keep it on status. This could optionally be a list selection field on the form, but we want to see our tasks organized by the status they're in. In the column section, we can see a visualization of how the columns will appear. These are all of our workflow stages here. We can reorder them by clicking this 6-dot icon and dragging them this way. We can also hide certain columns by clicking this hide icon, and then those columns can then be re-added with this Add Hidden Fields button. I'm going to keep this order as it is. Now for the card settings, you can see we've got a little card preview here. This is just how the cards will visually appear on the Kanban board. For the card title, I'm going to go with task title. For the card description, which is going to appear right below the title, I'm going to use the event. For the card color, we'll keep it on stage so it matches the stage that it's in. And then we'll add a couple additional fields such as department, we'll add the due date, and we'll add the assignee. We can reorder these by clicking and dragging this icon here. I'm going to put the assignee at the top and the due date at the bottom. Finally, we can expand all by default. Normally, we would have to click this little arrow to expand and see those additional fields, but I want to keep it expanded. And we can also lock the cards. We're not going to do that, and I'm going to show you why in just a second. But let's go ahead and save and launch our view to see what it looks like. Great, so as you can see, we have our workflow stages as different columns, and then we have all of our tasks showing up in those columns. Now, if we had locked the cards, we would not be able to drag records between stages, but since we didn't lock the cards, what we can do is click and drag and drop these records into any of these stages. This gives us a really quick way of moving records between stages without having to use either action buttons or whatever other means we had for moving between stages. So there you have it. We have completed the views for this application. I hope this video gave you a pretty good idea of the different kinds of views and settings available to you. In the next video, we're going to be setting up some very basic security and also changing some of the in-app navigation to clean up the app visually a little bit. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.